All right, my friends, you are on the character charts and summary page of part 1 of Romeo and Juliet. You should have clicked on this link for the Montagues and this link for the Capulets. I'm going to briefly go through these two families and summarize the play for you before you start reading, so that way you're already familiar kind of with the backbone of the story. So, to start, this play takes place in Verona, Italy. So if you go to Google Maps and you type in Verona, Italy, it's going to take you here to this city. This is the city of Verona. If I zoom out, you'll see that Verona is in northern Italy. So here's the country of Italy. Verona's up here. It's kind of halfway between Milan and Venice. It's not on the coast, it's inland. And if you zoom in on Verona, Italy, you'll see that the city has actually a lot of markers in it for Casa di Giulietta, which is Juliet's house in Italian, as well as other sites, Casa di Romeo, which is Romeo's house, other sites that have to do with the play. Now, William Shakespeare was not from Italy. However, he set Romeo and Juliet in the city of Verona. One of the coolest things about William Shakespeare's plays is that their settings are not that rigid, which means that if somebody wants to rewrite the play or recreate the play, they can set it almost anywhere and the story will still stay the same. But in the original play, the play takes place in Verona, Italy, and it starts with these two families, the Capulets and the Montagues. Now, I'm going to briefly go over the Capulets and the Montagues and then run through a short summary of the first half of this play, because you're going to read it and then you're going to watch it as well. So let's start with the Capulets. Let's start with the Montagues. The Montague family is Romeo's family. Romeo is a Montague. If you look at the family tree, which is in the second slide, you'll see Lord and Lady Montague at the top. They are the bigwigs. They are the father and mother of this family. The Montague family has an old fight with the Capulet family. Remember when we read the prologue last week? Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. So basically, you've got two old families. They've been in this city for a long time. The Capulets and the Montagues. They're both really wealthy. They both have a lot of people who work for them, and they hate each other. And it's an old fight. Nobody really knows how it started, but it's been around. This fight has been a part of the life of Verona for a long time. Remember, this is a fictional play. Let's just take a moment to remember this is fiction. It didn't really happen. It's fictional. So the Montagues and the Capulets hate each other. And in the beginning of the play, there's a big fight that takes place in the streets. The Montague boys are hanging out in the streets, and the Capulet boys are hanging out in the streets, and they get into a fight. They start fighting. There's a bunch of blood that's spilled. A bunch of people get hurt. And then the fight gets broken up by Prince Aeschylus, who is the Prince of Verona. He is on both sets of slides because he is in charge of everybody. He is not a part of the Montagues. He is not a part of the Capulets. He is above everyone else. Prince Aeschylus says to the Capulet families, to Lord Capulet and to Lord Montague, he says, if you guys keep fighting, if there's another fight in these streets, guess who's going to be in trouble? You will, Lord Montague. You will be in trouble, Lord Capulet. It's going to be your heads if you guys start fighting again. So Lord Capulet and Lord Montague are like, we got to end this. We've got to stop these fights. But the Capulet and Montague families hate each other. So it's hard to stop something that's lasted for a long time. So in this setting, in Verona, with these two feuding families, you have these two young people, these two teenagers, Romeo and Juliet, which are on these two slides. So first, let's talk about the Montague side of this family. So Lord and Lady Montague have one son. His name is Romeo. He's going to inherit all of the Montague money. He doesn't really want any of the Montague money. He just wants to be in love. He is a lover. He is a romantic. He is writing poetry all the time. He is wandering in the woods all the time. He's a super romantic. And at the beginning of the play, he is in love with a girl named Rosaline. Now, Rosaline never actually comes on stage. She is just there as his love at the beginning of the play. He's writing poetry for her. He loves her so much. She does not love him back. So Romeo loves Rosaline. Romeo has a cousin named Benvolio. Benvolio is really important because he's really close with Romeo. He's also really close with Lord Montague. Romeo also has a best friend named Mercutio. Mercutio is also the cousin to Prince Aeschylus. So Mercutio is not a part of the Montague family, but he is really close with the Montague family because Romeo is his best friend. Balthazar is Romeo's servant. He will frequently call him his boy. Balthazar has been his servant forever. So Balthazar and Romeo are really close as well. And then Friar Lawrence is Romeo's mentor. He's the priest or the father in the local church, and he's been with Romeo for a long time. Now for the Capulet family. Let's go through them for a little bit. Lord and Lady Capulet, again, very wealthy. Juliet is their only daughter. She is young, 14, 15 years old. She's a teenager. Juliet has mostly been raised by the nurse. The nurse is her best friend. She's her nanny, and the nurse is more of a mother to Juliet than Lady Capulet ever was. So Juliet and the nurse are very close. Friar Lawrence is also close with Juliet. He's known the Capulet family forever, and so he comes into play as well. Tybalt is Juliet's cousin. Tybalt is a part of the Capulet family. He's really close with Lord Capulet. He's also called the Prince of Cats. He's an excellent swordsman. So in that first fight on the streets, Benvolio and Tybalt get up in each other's faces, and Tybalt basically says to Benvolio, I'm going to send you to hell with my sword. And so they get into a big fight. Tybalt is feisty. He wants to kill Montagues all the time. So that's the side of the Capulet family that you need to know for this first half. You also need to know that Paris, the County Paris is what he's called. Sometimes they just call him the County. Paris wants to marry Juliet. And Paris has been chatting with Lord and Lady Capulet for a while about marrying Juliet. And it is planned that Juliet and Paris will get married. Paris is the cousin of Prince Aeschylus, and therefore also the cousin of Mercutio, Romeo's best friend. So this is where we start this romance. So in the very beginning of the play, Act 1, Scene 1, you've got the big fight on the streets. The Capulets and the Montagues fight. The prince says, that's it. If you fight again, you two, Lord Montague and Lord Capulet, are gonna suffer for it. He even says, I'll put your heads on the line. So like he's gonna kill them if they fight again. That's Act 1, Scene 1. Act 1, Scene 2, we meet Romeo, and we find out that Romeo is in love with Rosaline, and we find out that Romeo is just a big lover boy. He wants to be in love all the time. Act 1, Scene 2, Act 1, Scene 3 then leads into a party at the Capulet house. So Act 1, Scene 3, I apologize. Act 1, Scene 3, we meet Juliet. So Act 1, Scene 2, we meet Romeo. We get to know him a little bit. Act 1, Scene 3, we meet Juliet, and we find out that Juliet is supposed to marry Paris. And Juliet basically says, okay, I'll fall in love with him if I fall in love with him, but you can't force me to fall in love with anyone. And then Act 1, Scene 4 is a party at the Capulet house. Now, the Capulet party is very much just for Capulets. It's not for anyone else. But the Montagues decide to crash the party. It's a masquerade, so everybody's in masks, which means that Romeo Montague shows up to a Capulet party in a mask. While he's there, he sees Juliet and he falls in love, head over heels in love with Juliet. They have an interaction, they kiss in the party, and Romeo is in love. But Tybalt also sees Romeo at this party, and Tybalt says to Lord Capulet, I'm going to kill that guy. And Lord Capulet says, hey, calm down. This is my party. Don't ruin it. So then Romeo and his buddies all leave the party. Juliet also falls in love with Romeo at this party. And then the Montague buddies leave. And then we start Act 2. So that's Act 1, Scenes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we start Act 2. Act 2, Romeo ditches his buddies while they're leaving the party. And Romeo has to get back to Juliet because he has fallen in love with her. And so Act 2, Scene 1, he goes through the courtyard to the back into the house of the Capulets. So Romeo leaves his buddies and he goes into the house of the Capulets, not into the house, but into the courtyard. And he hears, or he sees a light in one of the windows. And he says, "What light is coming from, or what light from through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun." And so he's on the ground, and Juliet is up in her balcony. And Romeo listens as Juliet says that she loves him so much. And Romeo realizes that he has to be with Juliet. And that's when we get the very famous balcony scene in Act 2, Scene 2. Act 2, Scene 3. After that, Juliet and Romeo decide that they're going to get married. And so Romeo goes to tell Friar Lawrence that he wants to marry Juliet. So Romeo goes to Friar Lawrence. Friar Lawrence and Romeo chat for a while. Friar Lawrence cracks a joke about how was Romeo sleeping with Rosalind last night, and Romeo's like, "I totally forgot about Rosalind. I'm in love with Juliet now." And Friar Lawrence makes fun of him a little bit because it shows that Romeo is just really a lover. Like he almost doesn't really care who he's in love with. He's going to fall in love with someone. But the friar decides that he's going to help Romeo and Juliet because he thinks that if Romeo and Juliet get married, then maybe this fight would end. Maybe the families would stop feuding. So then, Act 2, Scene 4, all the Montague boys are hanging out, and the nurse, Juliet's nurse, which is her best friend, comes to talk to Romeo just to confirm that they are going to be getting married that day, that all the things that Romeo promised on the balcony last night are still going to happen. So the nurse comes to all these Montague boys, and the Montague boys crack a bunch of dirty jokes. There's a bunch of dirty jokes in that scene. And then Romeo shows up, and Romeo says to the nurse, "Tell Juliet to meet me at Friar Lawrence's at the church at 2:00, and we will get married." And so then the nurse goes back to Juliet. So then we go to Act 2, Scene 5. The nurse goes back to Juliet and tells her to go to the church at 2:00. Then Act 2, Scene 6, which is the final scene, Juliet and Romeo get married in the church. Friar Lawrence marries them. So the only people who know that Juliet and Romeo get married is Romeo, Juliet, Friar Lawrence, and the nurse. And that's it. So that is where we leave the end of part 1. They get married, and then things get pretty crazy after that. All right, please make sure that you read the play. You do not have to read it in Old English. You can read the modern translation. Break it up into pieces so that way you don't get overwhelmed with the amount of reading. And I look forward to hearing your responses.